war against Daesh is going to continue. We are determined to achieve the objectives of this war. And not only to degrade Daesh capabilities, we are going to destroy Daesh. And that is the aim. The crosshair of our weapons is at that target, and definitely we are going to achieve it.
It is exactly what the sane world needed to hear. Finally, someone takes action that has the ISIS killers on their heels and actually, according to some, afraid. It's what we're led to believe by the Jordanian government. But it may be more hyperbole than actual news about a band of killers for whom dying is maybe their least founded fear. Our guest is resident scholar at the American Enterprise Institute. He's a recognized expert on the Middle East and a former official at the Pentagon in the Office of the Secretary of Defense. Michael Rubin joins MidPoint. Mike, thanks so much for being here today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Ed.
We hear a lot of words now from the Jordanian government that they believe that they have the leader of ISIS on the run. They also say that he is now afraid after their current bombardment here. Do you go with that, or is that just more puffing out by the Jordanian government trying to make sure that their people are behind them?
Well, the answer is yes and yes. On one hand, it may have caught the Islamic State by surprise. They may have thought that they could divide the Jordanian people and knock them out of the coalition. On the other hand, it's going to take a lot to defeat the Islamic State, not simply airstrikes. And especially now, unfortunately, the Islamic State has strategic depth. Perhaps the head of the Islamic State isn't going to hang out in Syria. He might hang out in Mosul. But the fact of the matter is, he has plenty of places to choose from.
Michael, isn't a little bit curious, to hear about this, because ISIS seemingly, or at least what we've been led to believe, has been so smart from the very first moment they launched their first attack. They have been ahead of everybody. They have been figuring things out. They got it right. But for them to this time go against Jordan and believe that this might actually be in their favor, it seems as if they have just absolutely, that this decision has backfired horribly on them and they miscalculated. That in itself seems rather interesting, doesn't it?
Well, no one bats 1,000. And at the same time, the Islamic State might also calculate that they're going for the long haul, because they do know that, on one hand, they might be forced into the defensive in the immediate future by the Jordanian airstrikes. But should they gain another pilot, then all bets are off. And make no mistake, the King of Jordan is far more popular outside Jordan than inside Jordan. The Islamic State may calculate that all they have to do is wait until Jordanian Islamists step up to the plate and really take advantage of the Achilles heel, which is Islam in Jordan.
Does the King of Jordan have the juice in the region to be able to turn other countries to his way of thinking and turn these ideologies against ISIS?
Well, certainly the King of Jordan does. What's really ironic is that he's not alone and that the United States aren't supporting the people that do. If Jordan's biggest fear is losing a pilot while conducting these operations, then why aren't we giving them the Predator drones, which they've requested? The White House has rejected that. And General Sisi in Egypt has really been stepping up to the plate, talking about not only the need to militarily defeat these Islamist al-Qaeda affiliates, but also to reform Islam. And the United States is giving the cold shoulder to General Sisi. Ironically, Vladimir Putin seems to be a much better ally to these people stepping up against the Islamic State than Obama's White House.
What about the King of Jordan's actions here, Abdullah's actions? Does this draw America even closer? And how does it now force the hand of the Obama administration to get more involved?
Well, you know, it's one thing to lead from behind. It's another thing to lead from behind if people are actually stepping up to the plate. And that's what the King of Jordan is doing. Ultimately, it depends. We have yet to see how long this effort is going to be sustained. But the fact that Jordan is stepping up to the plate is positive. Unfortunately, we've had other states like the United Arab Emirates simply step away from the plate because they don't see the United States strategy as coherent. And then we have other countries still like Turkey who may talk a good game but are batting for the wrong side.
Well, the UAE apparently has come in since they first backed out. Now they've decided to get back in again with regard to some of the airstrikes here. So about 30 seconds. Is this good news, though, for the Obama administration now, where they have somebody there basically taking over the reins, and now they can lean back a little bit and wait and see what they can do before they actually get more involved?
Well, on one hand, it's good news for the Obama administration following that logic. More importantly, it's good news for other people in the region to finally have someone step up to the plate rather than simply talk about stepping up to the plate.
All right, now all we have to do is see what they're able to take care of here, because apparently they're launching over 60 airstrikes against ISIS, and they will continue. Michael, please stand by. Break, and we're back with a turn to a nation where the new government, or at least the people in charge, openly hate the United States. Yet we're going to have to deal with them sooner instead of later. And there's good political and strategic reasons as well. Stay tuned. MidPoint continues. America may be the great Satan, but we sure know our politics when it comes to working with bad guys. Let's spin there next. Welcome back former Pentagon official and Middle East expert from the American Enterprise Institute, Michael Rubin. Michael, we have the Houthis now running things in Yemen. First of all, let's just kind of bring this down for most people, because we use words like Houthis in Yemen, and a lot of people, their eyes glaze over because they're not exactly sure why Yemen is so important to the United States and why we need to care about this little nation.
Okay, well, first of all, the Houthis are a minority sect of Shiites in Yemen. The importance of Yemen is twofold. Number one, strategically, it sits astride the Bab al-Mandab, which is one of the choke points for the international shipping and energy trade. It's sort of like the equivalent of the Strait of Hormuz. Number two, Yemen has been a hotbed of conflict with its own al-Qaeda franchise. And President Obama has actually cited Yemen in his speeches. For example, his September 10th, 2014 speech unveiling the strategy against the Islamic State. He cited Yemen as the counter-terror example he wanted to follow. Well, it certainly doesn't seem like a pretty good outcome today.
We continue to hear stories about Yemen being that hotbed for terrorist growth, and that's where a lot of these camps are held, where a lot of people are basically recruited. Honestly, from what you've been able to learn, is the truth pretty close to that, or are we being given a lot of hyperbole here? Because I got to be honest, I've talked to some people who've said, yes, it's a hotbed, but we need to put our attention in other places as well. Yemen is just one spot that we need to look at.
Well, Yemen is one spot against many. I lived about 3 months in Yemen several years ago, and the thing about Yemen is it's always had this sort of tribal autonomy. So the central government didn't control too much outside the confines of the capital of Sana'a. That said, that's all well and good when the tribes concern themselves with local issues. If they're starting to give refuge to al-Qaeda and al-Qaeda affiliates, that's quite another problem entirely. And whenever you have groups like al-Qaeda control territory, then suddenly we're playing a very different ball game. On top of this, then you have the Houthis taking over the strategic chokehold of the Bab al-Mandab, and that's a problem for the U.S. Navy. That's a problem for international shipping.
Now, the Houthis are Shiite Muslim rebels. They have dissolved parliament. They are now in charge of the government. One of their favorite slogans is, "Death to America, death to Israel, damn the Jews." But the United States is making some entrees to try and get in with them and say, wait a minute, we're not here to get in your way right now. We understand you're running the government. So isn't it fair to say we're playing politics here with the bad guys, but we're doing it for a reason, and that reason is al-Qaeda?
Well, we're being pretty naive about it. First of all, just because both we and the Iranian-backed groups oppose al-Qaeda doesn't necessarily mean we see things the same way. It's almost as if you have a firefighter and an arsonist. We both might have a mutual interest in fires, but we're hardly on the same team. What you risk by dealing with Iranian-backed proxies that actively look towards Hezbollah as a model is simply swapping out one form of extremist Islamic terrorism for another.
In your opinion, would the Iranians, because they're behind the Houthis here, would they be looking for sort of a back-channel way to deal with America here, to gain a little American acceptance, to put things on their side, especially considering now that we're in nuclear arms negotiations and we know that al-Qaeda is one of the great harbingers of terrorism in the Middle East?
Oh, Ed, I wish that were true. The problem is, when you look at all the Iranian rhetoric and all the Iranian behavior, they're not looking at the United States as a partner in any of this. They see the United States as weak, and they're actively talking about expanding their strategic boundaries. At first, it was just the Persian Gulf. Then it was the Persian Gulf and the Indian Ocean.
But maybe that's the point, Michael. Maybe that's the point. They're looking to get in, and not to be friends with America, but almost to sort of sidle up, use America, maybe make it seem as if they're trying to be part of the get-along generation in the Middle East. And I guess the reason is I'm always seeing things, and I guess so many other people are, we are always seeing insidious things with the Iranian government because we cannot trust them.
Well, we cannot trust them, but it's important not only to look with suspicion upon the Iranians, it's important to note what they're actually saying. And when you look at what the Revolutionary Guard is saying, they're talking about defeating America. That's their goal, and certainly that's their goal in Yemen. If there's any evidence that they want to work with us in Yemen, I've yet to see it, and I'm not sure that anyone else has either. Certainly, we're just putting hope above reality.
Would your experience then tell us that trying to work with Yemen in any stretch of the imagination right now is simply a bad idea and we should walk away?
It depends which Yemen you're talking about. Trying to work with the Houthis.
The Yemen with the Houthis, run by the Houthi government right now.
We've got to be much more focused on coercion rather than co-option.
Which, of course, is something that we don't always seem to get right. By the way, very briefly, the United Nations is talking about going into Yemen and starting some negotiations to help. Pretty useless, would you guess?
It would be useless. The United Nations has never been successful in any of these sorts of negotiations. The United Nations is only successful once there's actually peace in keeping it, not in bringing about peace.
They have a wonderful place to stay in New York City, but outside of that, they don't really do much at all. Michael Rubin, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thanks so much for your comments. All right, a teenager shoots and kills someone, then poses with the dead victim for a selfie. We have reached a new and terrifying level of kids, murder, and self-importance. It is being driven by social media. And then, of course, there's also a mayor who says it's time to take the guns out of the hands of minors once and for all, or so he believes. That and much more coming up right here on MidPoint.